We're, what are we, a week away from training camp?
Actually, less than that. We have everybody reporting on Monday and Wednesday, and the first practice is Thursday.
That is if the players can get by, the Secret Service and all the other people.
I think there's been arrangements made.
Is that what it is?
But if they can't get by, we know a man who could help them.
Jimmy Kempski.
PhillyVoice.com has been pumping out articles like he hasn't been sleeping for days. Jimmy, when's the last time you slept?
Well, actually, I just moved too. So
oh my goodness!
Writing, I moved. So yeah, it's well, I mean, there's never a slow time for Eagles coverage because of the interest, which is great because I wouldn't have a job otherwise.
So, Jimmy, you've put out a lot of articles. You've gone position by position. You've gone with your top 20. But before we get into all of your lists and all your breakdown, I want to first ask you, stripping away all the lists and all the depth, what is something that you're just generally looking forward to about the 2016 Eagles season?
I would say Carson Wentz, but he's probably not going to play for a while. I am interested to see what the defense looks like because, they're transitioning from that two-gapping style 3-4 defense under Chip and Billy Davis. It's kind of a passive type of defense, and they're going to move to, more aggressive attack style 4-3 defense under Jim Schwartz, where they're just going to let the defensive linemen kind of put their heads down and go after the quarterback. So that's kind of what we were used to back in the day, when the Eagles were under Jim Johnson. Different style of defensive coordinators between Johnson and Schwartz, of course, but they're going back to that 4-3, and I think you're going to see, a lot more pressure on the quarterback going forward. So that'd be kind of the one thing that I think Eagles fans can kind of hang their hat on heading into the 2016 season, that the defense is going to be a lot better.
One of the guys that you have on your top 20, you have a lot of defensive guys here in your top 20 Eagles. You got Fletcher Cox, you got Malcolm Jenkins, you got Jordan Hicks, you got Vinny Curry, you got Connor Barwin, and then you got Brandon Graham wrapping up the 11. So I want to ask you, you mentioned the defense. Do you think that the defense has the most talent on this team because you have so many guys in your top 11 here?
Unquestionably, the defense is better than the offense, in my opinion. Yeah, I think they have far more talent on that side of the ball than they do on offense. I think the best two players on the team are on the defensive side of the ball, and obviously Fletcher Cox is the best player on the team. There's no doubt about that. And then I think Malcolm Jenkins is really an awesome player. I think he's a guy that really can do anything from that safety spot. It's kind of a little bit underrated. If he could just catch, then he would be, kind of thought of as an elite safety in the league. But yeah, it's just the way he plays the game. He'll hit, he'll cover, he can drop down and cover receivers man-to-man in the slot. He can play deep middle, so he can pretty much do anything from that position. He does everything well, with, again, the exception of he just drops too many interceptions. But yeah, those two guys are really, in my opinion, elite defenders in the NFL.
Jimmy Kempski's with us, Philly Voice, talking a little Eagles football and talking training camp. So, Jimmy, defense, we're talking a little bit about that, and we're talking about individual players, but then the Eagles made a move in the offseason that we've just talked ad nauseum about, which is Jim Schwartz coming in as the DC. Is he really going to make that much of a difference? I think that's the number one question a lot of people are asking.
Well, okay, so right off the bat, forget Jim Schwartz and forget whoever the defense coordinator is going to be. Right off the bat, the defense is going to have far better stats just because they're not going to have to deal with, that fast-paced offense putting them back on the field every 2 seconds. Obviously under Chip Kelly from 2013, 2015, they ran plays faster than any other team in the NFL, and by far. It really wasn't even close. Offense was great in 2013, so they were able to put points on the board. Not as good in 2014, and then in 2015, the offense was terrible. You could pretty much go to the bathroom on a commercial break. By the time you come back, they're punting already. So, they would, when they'd score fast, but when they go 3 and out, they'd go 3 and out really fast. So that defense was really put in a bad spot right off the bat. With a more traditional offense, that defense is going to be a lot better. But yeah, again, with Schwartz, I also think, their personnel is really more geared toward a 4-3 defense. I don't know why they really made that switch in the first place. I think Chip Kelly just came in and said, I'm going to have a 4-3. I'm going to have a 3-4, no matter who's in there. But based on the guys that the personnel that they actually have on that side of the ball, they're more well equipped to be a 4-3 defense because I think that they were previously wasting the talents of guys like Fletcher Cox who could really, really make an impact, being sort of a penetrating inside defender. And then the guys on the outside, like Vinny Curry, I thought was criminally underused because, he just wasn't a great fit in that 3-4. Now he may have a chance to shine, and I just think that 4-3 defense is a much better fit for what they have.
Now, Jimmy, I'm old, so I go back to, like, Veterans Stadium days, and I go back to, like, Gang Green, So anytime you're talking Eagles and defense, then the natural question that I have is, can this defense carry the team like, say, that great defense back in the Gang Green days?
No. I mean, no. The short answer.
You sure you don't want to think about that for a second?
Nah, they're not Reggie White here at defense by any stretch. But it's a good defense. I mean, they have nice players. They have guys like Fletcher Cox who are certainly already well established. They have guys with a lot of potential. Guys with potential who really haven't really put together big seasons yet, like Vinny Curry and Brandon Graham. And you have other guys that have shown flashes of ability, but just really haven't been consistent enough. And then when we're talking about, guys like Michael Kendricks there, you have a young guy in Jordan Hicks who really showed a lot before he got hurt. The question with him is, can he stay healthy? So they do have a lot of pieces on that defense, but obviously they're not they're not anything close to what the Denver Broncos were last year or what the Seattle Seahawks have been over the last few years. It's a nice defense, but they still have to build on that.
We're talking with Jimmy Kempski of PhillyVoice.com. I highly encourage everyone, go check out his articles. He's written, he's just pumping out pieces about everything from positions
Josh
to
is
top
reading
20
every one
lists.
of them, Jimmy. Josh is reading them word for
Jimmy,
word.
I am pining so bad for football that I'm just reading all of this stuff. So, Jimmy, I wanted to ask you, transitioning to the offensive side of the ball, one of the guys you have listed in your top 20, your number 3 guy is Lane Johnson, but your number 4 is Jason Peters. So I want to ask you, with the offensive line, we saw an offensive line that, let's be honest, at times they were kind of more like turntables than they were actually blockers. So what can we expect from this team this coming season, especially if you have both tackles in your top 5?
Yeah, I thought the tackles were fine last year. I thought they did a nice job. I thought really where they struggled last year on their offensive line was on the interior. Jason Kelsey had, probably his worst season of his career last year. I think he'd be the first to tell you that as well. And then the guards just were really not good. I think they really did a good job solidifying that one guard spot this offseason by signing Brandon Brooks away from the Texans, big guy with some athletic ability. He had really not had a guy who can move defensive linemen against their own will in the last few years. So he's a guy that maybe can come in and do that and bolster that running game. At the other guard spot, Doug Peterson already said that, Alan Barbary is quote-unquote his guy and he's going to be the starter. We'll see. We'll see if that remains the case. As once training camp wraps up, the Eagles did draft Isaac Seumalo in the 3rd round. He's going to be competing for that left guard spot. They also signed Stefan Wisniewski in free agency. He'll be competing for that spot as well. So they do have much better depth at least this year, and I think they again, like I said, they really did upgrade that right guard spot. They didn't draft any offensive linemen since 2013. So after they took Lane Johnson with the 4th overall pick in that draft, I think they went off the top of my head, I think like 21 or 22 consecutive picks without taking another offensive lineman until they just took one in Seumalo this year. So you ignore the offensive line for that long, and you're really going to have problems. It's the oldest offensive line in the NFL as currently constructed. It was the oldest offensive line in the NFL last year. So they really age and kind of players having their careers kind of start to go on that downward slope, like Jason Peters really kind of started to catch up with them. So they did bring in 3 guys this offseason that could be an impact. We also drafted I'm going to mess up the pronunciation of his name, but Halapoulivaati Vaitai, I believe.
You nailed it.
Say it in the 5th round. So they did make a concerted effort to improve the offensive line, which they absolutely had to do this offseason. So I think they'll be better there, but certainly it's an offensive line that is going to require even more attention in the next offseason and potentially further off seasons to come.
Well, much easier to say is Brandon Brooks. You did mention him a second ago. Jimmy, what have your impressions of him been when you've spoken with him, and the fact perhaps maybe are you impressed that he stayed around the area even throughout from the mini camps to the OTAs to now training? He's right in South Philly or right in Jersey, close, sticking by, trying to kind of catch up and be ready.
Yeah, he knows how to garner favor from the fans with his Twitter account, posting about Wawa and stuff like that. As for what I've seen from him so far, he seems like a smart guy if you talk to him. As from what we've seen from him on the field so far, nothing. I mean, there's really nothing you can tell from OTAs and minicamp because they don't have pads on, so they're just out there in shells and shorts. In training camp this year, Doug Peterson's going to run a much more physical camp than Chip Kelly did over the last 3 years. Now, I think players will actually take that over what Chip Kelly's practices were. Chip Kelly's practices were grueling in their own way in that they just had so many reps. It was just rep after rep after rep. Well, players just running around like crazy for the entirety of a 2-hour practice. Whereas Peterson's practices will be slower, but they will be hitting, they will be tackling, so they will be a lot more physical. So when we get into training camp, that's when you can really get a better idea of evaluating offensive linemen and defensive linemen. That's when we'll really get our first good look at what Brooks is.
Jimmy, if I can slide over a position that Jason Kelsey, I want to ask you about him because this guy was a Pro Bowler. He had played well previously, but last year he came in a lot lighter, and some people were wondering if that was because he was trying to keep up with the high-paced offense, but that lack of weight seemed to hurt his leverage, hurt his blocking. So what do you expect to see from Jason Kelsey a couple years removed from a Pro Bowl season?
Yeah, like I said, he'll be the first to say that, he was not very good last year, and he's got to be a lot better in 2016. And that's a guy who really is one of the most athletic players in the NFL for his position. I mean, just his athletic ability, being able to get out on the edge, getting downfield, making blocks way down the field. I mean, there were times where they'd run. I remember there was one play, I believe in 2014, they threw a little screen pass to Macklin, and Kelsey's chugging ahead of him down the field. Kelsey's actually running faster than Macklin, and he's hitting guys along the way. So he's really an impressive athlete. But you're right. I think, when you do have that athleticism and he is kind of a smaller guy, then that can kind of catch up with you. There were games last year where interior defensive linemen really dominated the Eagles. I'd say that was probably more on the guards in those games. For example, Ndamukong Suh just completely wrecked the game when the Eagles played the Dolphins last year. Gerald McCoy kind of did the same thing where he just kind of was unblockable when the Eagles played the Buccaneers last year. So again, that interior defensive line really has to do a better job than they did in 2016 than they did in 2015. I think Kelsey will be better. Obviously, like we already mentioned, Brooks will be in the mix, and he's an upgrade over what they had there. And then at that left guard spot, we'll see who wins that battle, whether it's Barbary, whether it's Wisniewski, or whether it's the rookie Seumalo.
We're talking with Jimmy Kempski of PhillyVoice.com. Be sure to check out his extensive pieces position by position, as well as the Eagles' top 20 heading into training camps that start next week. I want to transition over to the receivers, but first the tight ends, because there's a guy named Zach Ertz who you put on a list with a ton of other really good tight ends talking about what he could potentially be. I mean, you got Hall of Famers, Mike Ditka, potential Hall of Famer Rob Gronkowski, Kellen Winslow Sr., another potential guy, and Antonio Gates for the Hall of Fame. And then at the bottom, you're like, oh, and by the way, Zach Ertz.
Yeah, so what that list was, there are 17 tight ends in the history of the NFL that had at least 2,000 receiving yards over the first 3 seasons in the league. And Zach Ertz was, of course, one of them. And like you mentioned, obviously a lot of the names on that list were star players in their day, or still are star players now. Really, the one thing that Ertz hasn't done in his career to date is really be sort of that big time presence in the red zone. His touchdown numbers really haven't been all that impressive. I don't really see any particular reason why he hasn't produced in the red zone. I don't see anything in terms of his skill set that should be holding him back from, getting into the end zone more. So, we'll see if he can kind of add that to his game in 2016. But I think he's a guy that, is kind of is maybe a little bit unheralded for what he did. Obviously, he got a big contract from the Eagles this year, so they kind of recognize what he is. But in terms of, the fan base, I think people are kind of still waiting for him to, quote-unquote, break out, when in my opinion, he kind of already has. And I think he just continue to build on what he's done.
Do you think this is the year that he will be the top receiver? Because you're looking at Kansas City's offense, you had Travis Kelce, who is pretty much the top receiver for a couple of years down there, and you look at the Eagles' wide receivers, kind of a lackluster bunch. To be honest. I mean, Jordan Matthews technically should be a 2 or 3 receiver. Aguilar still has to show what he can do. So can Zach Ertz be the number 1 receiver for the Eagles in 2016?
Yeah, I think it'll be him and Matthews. He and Jordan Matthews are clearly by far and away the 2 best receiving options that the Eagles have. Maybe if you want to throw Darren Sproles in there too, but you're not going to get a lot of volume out of Sproles at this point in his career. But yeah, certainly Ertz is going to put up a lot of. He's going to catch a lot of passes. He's going to put up a lot of yards, as is Jordan Matthews, because like you said, they really don't have much else.
The Can I Borrow Your Moving Van, Jimmy Kempski, is with us. He's on Twitter at Jimmy Kempski, as we're talking a little Eagles football. And, of course, somebody has to throw him that football, Jimmy, which means that then I get to be the one that asks you about Sam Bradford. Is there anything new that we know about Sam Bradford we didn't know a week or a month ago?
He didn't leave again?
I kind of tried to set that up real on a tee for you, I know didn't they have their stuff in San Diego?
They did get a group of guys out there, and they kind of worked out on their own in California a few weeks ago, I guess. And yeah, I mean, he looked fine in OTAs and minicamp. And the one thing that I will say about Sam Bradford heading into 2016 is that I think he's far better equipped to get off to a better start than he did last year. I mean, we saw that preseason game last year against the Packers when he was 10 for 10. Almost 200 yards, I believe, through 3 touchdowns, and everyone was like, oh, my God, we're going to the Super Bowl. And then the season begins, and he is hideous. So, the difference between last year and this year, last year, especially, during OTAs and minicamp, he was really limited in what he could do on the field. He was out there. He was still practicing. Then in training camp, he wasn't limited. He did everything, but clearly, he wasn't a full go. And what I mean by that is he barely ran around at all. You actually see quarterbacks take off and run quite a bit in training camp because they're taught, if somebody's an open, then you just do in a game what you would do in 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s. You take off. Somebody's going to hit you, obviously, because you got that red jersey on. He ran maybe once or twice the entirety of training camp. I mean, he just did not run at all because I don't know if he could. So, he was still recovering from that ACL surgery. This year, that's in the rearview mirror. He's not worried about his leg. He's got a full season under his belt now, playing with after having that surgery. So I think he's in a better position to get off to a better start this year than he did last year, which again, that first half of the season was just brutally bad. So I will say that about Sam Bradford.
And that game you're referring to, Jimmy, that Packers preseason game, I always reference that as I drank the Kool-Aid game, because then I went and drafted him in my fantasy team. He was not good at the start of the season. I don't know that he was ever a good fantasy player, but nobody cares about my fantasy team. But I will just say that I drank the Kool-Aid and I was fooled like everybody else. Now, if he's better equipped than last year, in your opinion, does that further justify Wentz being the third-string inactive QB that made news, last week, I think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the plan is. I think what they have going there is fine. They want to take their time with Carson Wentz. I get it. That's kind of the old school way of bringing quarterbacks along. That 2012 season really kind of ruined expectations for rookie quarterbacks, and that's when you had Andrew Luck come out. It's when you had Russell Wilson come out. It's when you had RG3 come out. That's the season RG3 was really on fire. He won Rookie of the Year. So you had those 3 quarterbacks have immediate success in the NFL and played really well. And like I said, it kind of ruined what expectations were for quarterbacks coming out of college. And then, in subsequent years, rookie quarterbacks really didn't have that same level of success that those guys did. So now, you look at a guy like Carson Wentz. He's coming in from a much smaller college in North Dakota State. He comes in, and I think you want to really kind of give him a chance to adjust to, A, the speed of the game, B, learn a really extensive playbook, and C, kind of build rapport with the guys around him. So, let him take his time. Let the offense kind of get on track. Let the offensive linemen, the receivers, and the running backs and everyone else get on the same page. Then when sort of not even just Carson Wentz being ready, when the offense is ready and when Carson Wentz is ready, then maybe that's when you introduce him. But I think for the time being, Sam Bradford's going to be the starter as long as the Eagles are, I don't even say competitive, but I want to say still in the hunt in the NFC East, which really shouldn't be a high bar because the NFC East really from top to bottom kind of stinks. So as long as they're kind of in contention in that NFC East, I think you're going to see Sam Bradford playing it. And then even if Bradford gets hurt, I think you'll see Chase Daniel step in as the starter. But I think the plan will be for Wentz to be the starter in 2017. I think there's a near 0% chance Sam Bradford will be back in 2017.
We're talking about Jimmy Kempski of PhillyVoice.com. I encourage everyone to check out all of his series, breaking down the players, the positions, everything. I know you got your pass today for Eagles training camp, but the most important question that I have to ask you, Jimmy, in this entire interview is this. What's up with the cat?
Yeah, that was, you're referring to my Twitter avatar.
Yes.
Yeah, that was, do you remember, I guess it was around a year ago, LaShawn McCoy had a female-only party.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, the invite encouraged people to take pictures of themselves and submit it, and then he and his boys would decide whether you were worthy of going to the party or not.
Yeah.
So
That was the picture.
So just kidding around, I took that picture of myself. It was a selfie mirror shot holding my cat,
Right.
and I sent it to LaShawn on Twitter and asked him if I could go to the party. So that's what that picture's all
Did
about.
you even get a like? Was there a like?
Oh no, a lot of people liked it. I don't think I have no idea if LaShawn even saw it or not. But yeah, that was a popular tweet.
No
about
response from Cut on a Dime, but at least other people were entertained, and we like that.
And then in the aftermath of that, a lot of other people started like taking selfie shots, shirtless selfie shots with their cats in the mirror. And they started sending them to me as well.
So you started a trend.
Yeah, trending topic. Jimmy Kempski.
I did.
Good job. Follow Jimmy Kempski at Jimmy Kempski on Twitter and all of his work at PhillyVoice.com. Jimmy, appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.